Tom Miller always believed that peace was measured in acres, not dollars. Nestled just outside the small town of Willow Creek, his property spanned 5 lush acres, a mix of rolling grass, towering oaks, and a vibrant apple orchard his grandfather had planted 6 decades ago. The farmhouse, painted a warm red, stood as a testament to generations of care, each creaky floorboard and weathered shutter whispering stories of family gatherings, harvest festivals, and quiet autumn mornings. Most mornings, Tom would step out onto his porch with a mug of steaming coffee, letting the scent of soil and apples fill his lungs. He had a routine: inspect the orchard, tend the garden, water the flowers, and check for pests. It was peaceful, simple, and unbothered. Until the HOA arrived, Tom's love for gardening wasn't just a hobby. It was a ritual. His backyard was an organized chaos of colors and fragrances. Tulips of deep crimson jostled with cheerful marigolds, while delicate roses climbed trellises like carefully choreographed dancers. Hummingbirds darted between blossoms, and bees hummed in harmony with the rustling of the apple leaves, but he wasn't obsessed with perfection. He loved imperfection, the way nature grows without a rulebook. The orchard wasn't merely a source of fruit. It was a living memory of his grandfather, a man who had spent years hand-selecting apple varieties, grafting trees, and tending soil with unwavering dedication. Tom's connection to this land ran deep. The neighbors admired it, too, from a respectful distance. Kids would peek through fences to see the bright flowers or to taste the occasional apple, and old couples walking their dogs sometimes lingered, commenting on the vibrant colors or sweet scent in the air. Tom welcomed the admiration quietly, never needing attention, just respect for boundaries. Everything changed the morning Tom received the letter. The envelope, thick and official-looking, bore the Lakeside Estates HOA logo. Curious, he sliced it open, expecting perhaps a polite notice about community meetings or minor landscaping suggestions. Instead, the paper practically shouted at him, "Dear Mr. Tom Miller, you are in violation of community aesthetics rules. Landscaping outside of approved designs is subject to a fine of $500. Immediate compliance is required." Tom blinked, read the letter twice, then thrice. $500 for flowers? He muttered aloud. He skimmed the HOA's lengthy community aesthetics rules booklet that accompanied the fine. Every page was filled with regulations on flower height, color coordination, hedge trimming, and even the spacing of plants. And nowhere did it explicitly apply to properties outside the HOA's jurisdiction, which Tom's clearly was. Tom's blood boiled. He wasn't just offended, he was outraged. Not because of the fine itself, but because someone had the audacity to dictate what he could plant in his own backyard. A few days later, Karen Whitfield, the HOA officer, appeared at his gate, clipboard in hand, and a tight smile plastered across her face. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice professional, almost sweet, "I'm here regarding the landscaping fine. It's important that you understand the consequences of noncompliance." "I understand perfectly," Tom replied evenly. "You have no jurisdiction here. This is private property, and your rules don't apply." Karen's smile twitched, but she continued, "We must maintain community standards. It's not just a suggestion. The fine is enforceable." Tom shook his head. "Enforceable? On private property? You're mistaken. I will not pay. I will not comply with this arbitrary fine." The tension was palpable. Karen tilted her head, her eyes scanning his backyard. "You really think you can ignore this?" she asked, voice low. "Ignoring it will escalate the matter." "I'm aware," Tom said, "but standing by my rights is worth it. These flowers, this orchard, they're more than decoration. They're my property, my family, my history." Karen scribbled something on her clipboard and walked away, heels clicking sharply on the pavement, leaving Tom standing among his flowers, shaking with a mix of anger and determination. Word of the fine spread quickly. Some neighbors whispered behind their fences. "Tom? That grumpy gardener," one said. "He'll just pay it quietly. No one defies the HOA." Others offered quiet support. Mrs. Caldwell, who lived 2 houses down, left a note tucked under Tom's gate. "You have every right to defend your garden. Don't let them bully you." Tom felt both isolated and supported. It became clear some neighbors feared the HOA enough to stay silent, while others admired his courage. That duality only strengthened his resolve. Days passed. Each morning, Tom checked his mailbox for new letters. Each afternoon, he tended the orchard, and each evening he reflected on his options. The HOA didn't relent. Notices kept coming, each word meticulously designed to intimidate. Tom began documenting everything. Photos of flowers, time-stamped notes, and sketches of his backyard layout were cataloged. He started drafting responses, preparing for a fight he now understood would not be simple. Even at night, the tension lingered. He'd lie awake imagining HOA officers walking through his orchard, trimming his roses, and rewriting history. He refused to surrender to fear. The initial confrontation had escalated. Another letter arrived, more aggressive than the last. Failure to comply with the $500 landscaping fine will result in legal action. The HOA reserves the right to place liens on your property and escalate penalties. This is your final notice. Tom clenched the letter in his hands, heart racing. He looked over the orchard, the tulips swaying in the wind, the roses standing tall, the apples glowing in the morning sun, and made his decision he would not pay. He would not back down, and he would defend his property to the end. Tom Miller's decision to stand his ground against the HOA had set a storm in motion. Letters, fines, and threats had escalated into a full-blown battle. The HOA was relentless, claiming authority, insisting on compliance, and attempting to paint Tom as a selfish, uncooperative neighbor. The morning the first lawyer's letter arrived, Tom knew it was no longer just about flowers. The HOA's attorney, a sharp-suited woman with a clipped tone, demanded removal of certain plants and threatened liens if the fine wasn't paid. Tom read the letter carefully, scanning the legal jargon, searching for leverage. There was loopholes, omissions, and jurisdictional limits he could exploit. He called Bill Haskins, his grandfather's old friend and a seasoned property lawyer. "Bill," Tom said, tension evident in his voice, "they're threatening me with liens, fines, and now legal action. What do I do?" Bill's voice was calm, steady. "First, don't panic. Document everything. Photos, letters, any communication. We'll counter. They're bluffing. HOAs often rely on fear to force compliance. But the law is clear, and your deeds are stronger than their threats." Tom began gathering evidence. Photographs of the backyard, historical property maps, handwritten notes from his grandfather, and timestamps of previous communication with the HOA. Each page, each photo, each note became a shield in the fight to protect his land. The first court date arrived. Tom entered the courtroom, a mix of anxiety and determination coursing through him. Karen Whitfield, the HOA officer, sat smugly at the front, flanked by the HOA's attorney. She gave a tight smile, confident that bureaucracy would prevail over principle. Bill presented Tom's case meticulously. Ownership documents dating back generations, evidence of continuous maintenance, and a clear boundary that placed the HOA's claims outside their jurisdiction. "Your Honor," Bill said, "the HOA has no authority over Mr. Miller's property. The fines are baseless, the threats unfounded, and their attempts to enforce compliance constitute harassment and intimidation." The HOA attorney countered aggressively, citing supposed community easements and vague historical claims. "Your Honor, the path has existed before Mr. Miller's tenure. The community has a right to access shared spaces. Noncompliance will harm the neighborhood's cohesion." Tom felt a mix of disbelief and frustration. "Shared," he muttered under his breath. His backyard had been private for decades. There was nothing shared. Over the next few days, the courthouse became a stage for drama. Depositions, maps, surveys, and affidavits flew back and forth. Local reporters caught wind of the story. Headlines like "Farmer Fights, HOA Over Backyard," and "Small Property, Big Battle" began circulating. The narrative began to sway. Tom was no longer a recluse, but a man standing up against overreach. HOA residents were split. Some whispered support for Tom, recognizing the unfairness. Others, loyal to Karen, try to shame him for resisting community improvement. Notes appeared on his porch, some apologetic, some accusatory. Through it all, Tom remained steadfast. Early mornings in the orchard became both ritual and strategy. He walked the rows of tulips, roses, and apple trees, reminding himself of what was at stake. Not money, not reputation, but principle. Each flower was a line in the soil, a marker of history, a testament to his family's legacy. The court proceedings culminated in a tense hearing. The judge leaned over maps, photographs, and legal documents. "Mr. Miller," he said, addressing the HOA, "do you have documented evidence that these alleged easements existed prior to the current property ownership?" Karen's attorney faltered. We rely on historical precedent," the judge's gaze sharpened. "Without concrete evidence, your claim is unsubstantiated. The law protects private property rights. Mr. Miller's property is his own, and he cannot be penalized for maintaining it as he sees fit." A wave of relief swept over Tom, but he knew it wasn't over. Legal battles were rarely simple. The HOA threatened to appeal, promising further resistance. But with Bill's guidance and the meticulous documentation, Tom had positioned himself solidly, ready for any challenge. Even as the court ruled temporarily in his favor, Tom recognized a deeper lesson. Standing up against authority, especially one backed by bureaucracy, required patience, persistence, and clarity. Each letter, each meeting, each photo was part of a narrative he controlled, a story of rightful ownership, respect, and integrity. As he left the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Cameras flashed. "Mr. Miller, are you confident you'll win?" one shouted. Tom smiled calmly. "This isn't about winning or losing. It's about standing for what's right. And that, I cannot compromise." The escalation had transformed the quiet orchard into a battleground of principle versus power. Yet, with each passing day, the scales began to tip. Evidence, truth, and meticulous preparation had given Tom the upper hand. And while the HOA still posed threats, their authority over him had eroded under the weight of facts, law, and the unwavering will of one man determined to protect what was rightfully his. 2 months after the battle began, the tension had reached its peak. Tom Miller stood outside his farmhouse one crisp morning, watching the dew glisten on the apple leaves. Each tree seemed to whisper reminders of the fight he'd waged, the letters he'd filed, the hours spent documenting every inch of his property. It had been grueling, exhausting, and often lonely, but the orchard had been worth every second. When the court date finally arrived, the atmosphere inside the courtroom was electric. Reporters filled the benches, cameras flashing every few seconds, scribbling notes in a chaotic rhythm. Karen Whitfield, the HOA president, sat at the front, flanked by her attorney, her posture rigid and her confident smile barely holding. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and tension, and Tom could feel it press against his chest. Bill Haskins, Tom's lawyer and longtime family friend, laid out the evidence with precision. Deeds dating back decades, historical photographs of the orchard, testimonies from neighbors, all meticulously organized to prove that the HOA had no legal authority over Tom's land. Maps showing the clear boundary lines of the property were projected across the courtroom screen, leaving no room for ambiguity that Karen's attorney tried desperately to maintain control, citing supposed easements and vague historical claims that, on paper, sounded plausible. "Your Honor, there's always been community access to this land. Noncompliance by Mr. Miller disrupts neighborhood cohesion," he argued, voice rising. Tom's jaw tightened. He had walked the orchard countless times, thinking of the generations of his family who had nurtured it. "Shared," he muttered under his breath, the word tasting bitter. There was nothing shared about these apple trees, nothing shared about the tulips or the roses that bloomed in defiance of HOA regulations. Bill dismantled their claims piece by piece, showing clear evidence of the property's private status and the HOA's overreach. The room seemed to shift. The judge leaned forward, scanning the documents, glancing between the parties. Finally, in a calm but firm voice, he addressed the HOA. "You don't own what you never bought. The claims against Mr. Miller's property are invalid. This case is dismissed. The words echoed like thunder. A stunned silence followed. Karen Whitfield's lips pressed into a tight line. Her confident posture crumbled slightly as reality sank in. The HOA's authority, the threats, the fines, it all evaporated in an instant under the weight of facts and justice. Outside the courthouse, reporters rushed to get Tom's reaction. "Mr. Miller, are you relieved?" one shouted. Tom's expression was steady, composed. "Relief isn't the right word," he said. "This was never about winning or losing. It was about standing for what's right. Respecting your property, your history, your family. That's what matters." Returning home, the orchard seemed transformed. The sunlight filtered through the apple trees, scattering golden light across the grass. Tulips and roses swayed gently in the breeze, their colors vivid against the green backdrop. Tom walked slowly through the rows, hand brushing leaves, inhaling the scent of apples and earth. Every tree, every blossom, every meticulously tended flower symbolized resilience and victory. Neighbors who had once whispered from behind fences now approached openly, offering congratulations, gifts, and apologies. A few children came running, curious and smiling, asking questions about the apples and the flowers. The orchard, once a quiet battleground, had become a place of shared admiration and community spirit. Without interference, without fines, without fear, Tom decided to host a harvest festival that fall, inviting everyone from the neighborhood, HOA members or not. Tables were set with fresh apples, pies, and cider. Children ran through the orchard, laughter echoing between the trees. Parents relaxed on benches, talking quietly, sharing smiles. The festival was more than a celebration of produce. It was a celebration of resilience, of standing firm, and of community built on respect rather than force. Karen Whitfield, it was rumored, had resigned as HOA president shortly after the ruling and moved away, perhaps to escape the embarrassment or to find a new territory to control. Some of her allies tried to maintain appearances, but gradually, respect for private property began to outweigh the old culture of overreach in the neighborhood. Tom spent quiet moments on his porch as the festival wound down, sipping warm cider and watching the sun dip behind the orchard. The fight had tested him, pushed him to his limits, and shown him who he was. He thought about his grandfather, imagining the pride he would feel, and felt a deep, resonant connection to the land that no bureaucratic power could sever. In the end, it wasn't just the orchard that had survived. It was Tom's principle, his family legacy, and his understanding of what it meant to protect something precious. The fight had reminded him and the community that standing firm isn't just about confrontation. It's about clarity, courage, and respect. And as the stars began to twinkle above the orchard that evening, Tom realized something profound. Freedom, once defended, becomes a living testament. Every tree, every blossom, every apple was a symbol of that freedom, a reminder that no HOA, no bureaucrat, no outsider could take away what you truly own. The orchard remained alive, vibrant, and undisturbed. And Tom, walking slowly among the trees, knew that the fight had been worth every sleepless night, every tense conversation, and every drop of sweat. The land, his family legacy, and his peace of mind were safe, and in that security, he found a satisfaction deeper than any victory.